Today I have a phenomenal memory hack for you. I have used this for a long period of time and it allows me to remember and recall things almost perfectly from decades later, not just years, decades. I still remember things from when I was a teenager after I learned this and started to apply it to parts of my life. For example, this one time, and this was before smartphones, so you couldn't just look it up and have it with you at the time, I had to figure out where I was going in town and had to go for a very specific place, and I had to get a bus and go on a route and know where to get off, and it was hard to do that pre-Google Maps and what have you. And so what I did was I memorized from the internet the route and how the instructions of how to get there. So the story goes, I have to get the bus, and the bus comes along and it has two spiders instead of wheels, so I have to get the number 16 bus. And then when I go over a bridge, my right foot goes into the water and it gets wet and I feel the wetness on my foot, and that means I need to get off the bus after it goes over the bridge, over this canal. And then, because it was my right foot, and what's on my right foot is now wet, and I'm wearing a green shoe. And why is it important that it's my right foot? Because I had to go down to the left, and the road had green in the name of the sign. It wasn't a green lane, but like in the road name had the word green in it, and so I knew I had to go down that road, and then that's where I had to get off. And that's just a short story, but the fact that I still remember it almost 20 years later, because I was only a teenager when I had to remember where to go, and I don't have to force it. It's just there in the brain naturally, the story. And it's great for like remembering people's names. I have it for some really long abstract names that you have to remember. There's this one girl, and, you know, it's like a story with a Loch Ness monster and it's climbing up a beanstalk, and then there's a Mini Cooper at the top and blah, blah, blah. And it was to remember her name. And then for phone numbers, like I remember numbers through this as well. For example, there is a hive, a fine, sorry, there is a fine for like you being like a car fine, you know, for a parking fine, you know, a fine, and it goes onto a beehive and then a single bee comes out. So 951. Right, so fine is for 9, hive is for 5, and just one bee comes out. You can use a different thing for 1 if you want to. And then the next part of it is there's a tree and it's floating through the air in a golf course, and somebody's shouting 4, so it's 3, 4. And then there is a giant mouth and it eats the tree as it comes down, and that's 8. And I'm not going to say the rest because I don't want to give out the number, but like the idea is I have these two concepts to remember that number, and I still remember it. And there's lots of these little parts that I've done over the years to lodge into my memory. Nowadays, obviously, you can just stick everything into here. Remembering PIN numbers, that's another great one you should do and use this for. But you just don't forget things. Remembering passwords, if you have like complicated long words, you can combine it to create these memory tricks in your brain. I first learned about this in a book by Darren Brown. It was like a mental magic book when I was a teenager, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And then I saw it again in another book years later called Moonwalking with Einstein, and that also had some memory tricks. And you can like remember really long lists, and like part of that was, you know, not just remembering like shopping lists. That was one of the things you could do to practice. But you could memorize whole decks of cards. There was memory palaces as well. I tried to do memory palaces for a while. I'm sure you've all heard of those as well. And that is another fantastic way. I don't really overuse them. I don't find that I need to remember that many things nowadays because everything you just stick in the phone. But like for things like that, like important phone numbers, or like when you need to go in a certain place, or just remembering information, or for like exams and what have you, you can storyfy it. And particularly if you put some level of sensation into it. So like a touch, a smell, a feeling, a taste, sight, more a wet, cold, hot, etc. These sensations amplify the memories, and then if you do want to put emotions in there as well, it can then amplify that memory as well, and so it just sticks in your mind, and it's a fantastic trick that has served me very well over the years. Unfortunately, yeah, I do not really find the need to have this massive memory for things these days, but it's a good thing to just even try do a few times. The only difficulty with it is you do have to put some level of effort into crafting a narrative around this story in your mind, and the more ridiculous and abstract it is, the better. Like spiders carrying a giant double-decker bus, like that's an abstract narrative. If it's very easy, if it makes sense, if it was just a bus with 8 wheels, you wouldn't remember that as well as two spiders on top of a bus. There's have an abstract idea. But yeah, it's just it's good practice to try and do, and you'll be surprised 20 years later you'll still remember whatever it is you're trying to remember now. So absolutely worth having a go at it. And because you never know when you're going to lose your phone and not have access to those things you're trying to remember in the future. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I wish you luck. Have a fantastic day. Goodbye.